Welcome to the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky of Break of Day Capital. I talk to leading experts to discuss a wide range of subjects to educate investors on best-in-class practices to build legacy wealth and positively impact communities. Let's jump in. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Real Estate Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Gary Lipsky with Break of Day Capital. Today on the podcast, we have Sahil Bloom. This was recorded for the Invest Smart Summit that we held on June 6th. This was one of 10 amazing sessions we had covering the economy, best practices for limited partners, tax strategies, longevity, legal expertise, mindset, and other alternative investment strategies. You can buy the recordings and hear from the 18 expert speakers at investsmartsummit.com. It will be your best investment you make this year. Hey everyone, we have launched the BODC Multifamily Impact Fund. Invest with a trusted operator with a track record of success. Our fund offers diversification, risk mitigation, tax benefits, and stringent acquisition criteria. If you'd like to learn more, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com. Okay, let's get to Sahil Bloom and his incredible insights. Well, I'm absolutely thrilled to have Sahil Bloom join us today. Sahil is a New York Times bestselling author of The 5 Types of Wealth, a transformative guide to design your life, and the writer of the biweekly newsletter, The Curiosity Chronicle, with millions of subscribers, and the managing partner of SRB Ventures, an early stage investment fund. Welcome, Sahil.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a thrill to be here.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write the book? Was there something in your life that was like a major turning point, but very curious how you wrote this amazing book.
My journey really turned on a dime with a single conversation that I had in May of 2021. But the build up to that conversation is important. I had spent the first 7 years of my career marching down the quote unquote traditional path to a successful life. I put my head down working in finance. I took a job at a private equity fund. And basically convinced myself year after year that my satisfaction, my contentment, my happiness as a human being was on the other side of some financial goal, some achievement, some bonus, some promotion, some title, whatever the thing was. And every single year I would go and get that thing, and I would feel that really familiar sensation that I think we've all experienced, where we've built up this destination as the point at which we will feel we have arrived. And we get that momentary blip of dopamine-induced euphoria, and then we reset and have this sensation of never having enough, never doing enough, that dread of needing to do more. And unfortunately, along that path over those 7 years, I became more and more blind to all of the other areas of my life. I was sort of winning this one battle of making more money and getting these promotions, but losing the much bigger picture war. My relationships were really starting to suffer with my parents. I was living 3,000 miles away from them, very rarely seeing them. With my sister, and most importantly with my wife. We were struggling to conceive at the time, and it was creating real strain in our marriage for the first time. And, it came to a point at the end of 2020, early 2021, where I just started to have this sensation that from the outside looking in, it seemed like I was winning the game. But if that was what winning felt like, I had to be playing the wrong game. And it all came to a head in this one conversation in May of 2021. I went out for a drink with an old friend, and we sat down, and he asked how I was doing. And I told him that it had started to get difficult living so far away from my parents, who were getting older. I noticed them slowing down for the first time in my life. And he asked how old they were, and I said mid-60s. And he asked how often I saw them, and I said about once a year. And he just looked at me and said, okay, so you're going to see your parents 15 more times before they die. And that was the moment that changed my entire life. Because in that one moment, I realized that my entire definition of success, of what it meant to build a wealthy life, had been incomplete. It was a total gut punch to think about the idea that the amount of time you have left with the people you care about most in the world is that finite and countable, that you can place it onto a few hands. And I realized that if we didn't make a change now, we were going to end up in a place where we didn't want to be. And my wife and I did exactly that. We took a dramatic action. Within 45 days, I had left this high paying, high status job. We had sold our house in California and we had moved 3,000 miles across the country to live closer to both of our sets of parents. And in that one action, there was a very important realization, which is just that you are in much more control of your time than you think. You are in much more control of your whole life than you think. We had taken an action and fundamentally created time for the things that we cared about. That number, 15 more times before my parents were gone, is now in the hundreds. I see my parents multiple times a month. They're a huge part of my son, their grandson's life. We had taken an action and fundamentally created time. And that was the spark that led me on this journey to write this book, to share these ideas with the world. The recognition that you get to define what a wealthy life looks like to you. And then you can take actions to go and build around those things.
What I love is that you took immediate action. You didn't wait a year, thinking about it, what you should do. You took immediate action and changed the course of not only your life, but your family's life.
Yeah, I do think that there's a principle here underlying all of these areas of life and just in general, any progress or growth that you're trying to create in your own life, which is just that overthinking is the biggest barrier to any change. And overthinking oftentimes comes from this fear, right? We are very afraid of taking these great leaps of faith in our journeys. And a lot of that fear comes from this sensation that you are incapable. And the thing that I have always come to recognize and try to remind myself of regularly is that fear comes from inexperience, not incapability. You are afraid because you haven't done it yet, not because you can't do it. And that is only solved through taking action. It's only solved through having the courage to actually move, to take action in the present moment. And so if you're trying to solve that fear, you actually need to move. And that was really the sensation that we had and the rationale for taking that dramatic action and just moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. That is so powerful because we're all human. We all face that fear. And yeah, and we're all absolutely capable.
Yeah, the other thing to recognize here is that what we're talking about is a leap of faith. And those leaps of faith are particularly scary because of what I would characterize as two sort of asymmetries, if you will, an information asymmetry and then an evidence asymmetry. The information asymmetry is that you have full, perfect information on where you currently stand in life, your current path, and almost no information about what the path looks like on the other side of that leap. Similarly, you have full evidence of your ability to live where you currently are, meet your responsibilities, pay your bills, take care of your people. And you have no evidence on your ability to do that on the other side of that leap. So those asymmetries manifest as this feeling of nothingness, this enormous leap with this endless expanse down below. And the way that you solve that, the way that you sort of deconstruct that problem is to say, okay, the asymmetries are the problem to be solved. If I want to take a leap of faith and make it feel less scary, I need to solve those asymmetries. And I can do that by gathering information about what that other path looks like and by creating evidence of my ability to live on the other side of that leap, whether by, getting my first customer, setting up the landing page for that new business, starting to create traction and lead generation, whatever those tiny actions are, those are creating evidence that make that leap of faith feel significantly less leapy, if you will.
Yeah, there's this great quote, and I'm going to totally screw it up, but it's like, success or growth is like on the other side of fear, something to that effect. But it's so true.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
You talk about building a bigger boat. Talk about your research on that and what that means.
There was this story during my research process, spending time with these different people who had built and accumulated incredible financial wealth. And one of those people was a friend of mine who had built this company and sold it for hundreds of millions of dollars in a transaction that netted him well over $100 million personally. And he wanted to celebrate. And so he rented this yacht. And he was going to take all of his friends and family on this amazing trip on this yacht that he had rented. And everyone arrived. And it was this really proud moment for him. He felt this enormous pride of being able to create this experience in this moment for people that he loved. But as everyone was getting on this yacht, one of his friends, as they were walking up, looked over to the mooring to the left, and there was an even bigger yacht, and said, wow, I wonder who's on that one. And in that moment, all of the pride, all of the joy that my friend had experienced in creating this moment was deflated at this comparison to the boat that was over at the next mooring. And the reminder that I try to give in the context of that is that in life, if you measure your entire worth around these financial means, around these numbers, there's always going to be a bigger boat. There's always going to be someone. You are never going to feel like you have enough because you're measuring your entire worth and success around something that, frankly, in society, you're always going to be convinced you need to go and chase more and more and more of that thing. So until you create your own definition of success, your own definition of what it means to build a wealthy life, you will never feel like you have enough.
Yeah, 100%. Let's talk about social wealth. How do you measure that?
Social wealth is fundamentally about relationships, right? It is about this recognition that investments in your relationships are probably the single best investment that you can make. There's this anecdote that I love of Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, who was once asked by a student what was the earliest sign of civilized human society. And the student, I think, expected her to answer something about, the use of tools or language or something like that. But she answered that it was a healed, broken femur. And it's kind of a weird answer. You're like, what does a weird, random broken bone in the hip have to do with civilized human society? And it's important to note that a broken femur takes a long, long time to heal. It's like months of healing if anyone's ever experienced it. And so what she was saying was that prior to civilized human society, a broken femur was effectively a death sentence. It basically was something where you broke your femur, you were left behind, the hunter-gatherer tribe or whatever would move on, and you were left for dead. But a healed broken femur indicated that you were cared for. It indicated that other people had taken care of you. They'd given up their own well-being in order to, sacrifice that for the greater good of these other people that were there. And it's this recognition that these relationships are what make us uniquely human. Relationships are what allow us to survive and thrive into old age. And so social wealth, I think of as arguably the most important form of wealth. We have a robust body of scientific evidence today that shows that it is your relationships that fundamentally create a happy, healthy life. The Harvard study of adult development followed the lives of 2,000 people over the course of 85 plus years. They found that the single greatest predictor of physical health at age 80 was relationship satisfaction at age 50. It wasn't blood pressure, it wasn't cholesterol, it wasn't smoking or drinking habits. It was how you felt about your relationships that determined your outcomes. And so what better reason do we need to invest in our relationships on a daily basis?
Yeah. Definitely agree. So what are some social hacks you've learned over the years that you wish you knew when you were younger?
I think the most important one is a very simple mindset shift. So when it comes to money, everyone that's listening to this is very familiar with financial wealth building. They're very familiar with compounding as an idea, right? Compounding, Einstein called it the eighth wonder of the world. You put some money away today in whatever asset class, it's going to stack and compound over the long term. And a little bit of money invested today is better than zero because it's going to compound and stack up. Small things become big things. The exact same principle applies to your relationships, applies to social wealth. The tiny thing done well on a daily basis today is going to stack and build and compound within your relationships and in that domain. But we don't think that way on a daily basis, typically. It is very, very hard to remember that sending a text to someone when you think about them is better than doing nothing. You don't have to do the dramatic, very time intensive, energy intensive relationship building things. If you are busy, if life is pulling you in 100 different directions, just sending the text to someone when you're thinking about them is an incredible action that moves that relationship forward. Anything above zero compounds. If I could get one thing tattooed on my body, it would probably be that idea. Anything above zero compounds. Ambitious people need that more than anyone else because ambitious people are the absolute worst at allowing optimal to get in the way of beneficial. We constantly say things like, "Oh, I don't have, an hour to work out, so I'm just not going to work out today." Or I don't have, 2 hours for deep work, so I'm just going to send email instead. Or I don't have an hour to call my mom, so I'm not even going to text her. When the truth is that the tiny action is going to stack and compound into your future. Anything above zero compounds. So when it comes to relationships, just do the tiny action. When you think something nice about someone, let them know right then and there. Be the catalyst to pull that old group of friends together for the annual trip. Do those tiny things on a daily basis, and you will benefit from it in the long run.
Yeah. So compounding interest for you guys out there is not just about, financial, but social and plays a huge dividend. I was in a mastermind group, I think probably about like 10 years ago and having some marriage problems at the time. And someone asked me, how many business books have I read? And I said, probably at least 100. And then he asked me, how many, marriage books have you read? And I'm like, oof. I mean, that hit hard. I mean, maybe I read one book at the time, and so I'm curious obviously that's the most important relationship you can have. And so what is your advice to foster a healthy, striving, romantic relationship?
I think that the first thing I would say to anyone, especially younger people in this day and age, is focus more on growing than falling. We live in a day and age, especially the social media age, when everyone is so obsessed with the falling in love phase. That is kind of the pictures you see on social media. It's the like manicured, perfect images, the date nights, the honeymoon, all of these like perfect images. When the reality is that most of life is just sitting around doing nothing. And that is the growing. The growing is the shared struggle. It is the hard conversations. It's the navigating, the ups and downs of having children, of strain, of, the challenges, life and death, and these things that come into your world. And real deep relationships are built through the willingness to grow. Life is not all about falling. It is about growing. And so until you embrace that idea, until you embrace the growing, until you embrace that shared struggle is what builds unbreakable bonds, you will always be on the surface with everyone that you engage with. And look, I would say if I had one thing that I bemoan about modern culture, it is that pressing the eject button has never been easier. We have like right at our fingertips with our phones, right? All of my friends that are in the dating market, you have thousands of people right at the touch of your fingers. And the problem with that is that the second your current relationship is no longer feeling like that honeymoon phase, people know that they can just press the eject button and opt out into one of thousands of options right at their fingertips. And the reason that's so damaging is because true depth is built through navigating the shared struggle. It is, what releases oxytocin is actually going through that meaningful struggle in any area of life, but in relationships in particular. So if you press the eject button right when things get hard, you are never going to find that deep relationship that it would otherwise build.
Yeah, that's great advice. You wrote about the IKEA effect, and when I first read it, I kind of laughed because I joke with my family that one of my greatest accomplishments was putting together a 350-piece play kitchen for my girls for the holidays. Talk about the IKEA effect.
Yeah, the IKEA effect is this idea that we place more value on things that we had a hand in building. Um, it's like basically it's based on this idea of IKEA, where you actually have to play a hand in building the furniture, and people place more value on things when they've had to struggle, when they've had to build those things. My personal interpretation of that really has to do with this whole idea of meaningful struggle, that it feels so much better to achieve a win in life when it was hard earned. We don't want the easy win. Like everyone sort of like looks for these lottery tickets, right? You're always constantly looking around like, what's the get rich quick? What's the lottery win? What's the easy way for me to get from 0 to 10 million or whatever the thing is? When the truth is that getting that is much less exciting than you think, because you didn't have to work for it. You didn't have to go through the meaningful struggle. So you therefore do not value it as highly as if you did. So meaningful struggle is the pathway to achieving that durable, lasting happiness. It is enduring that meaningful struggle. The delayed gratification is the key to life.
What is one of your greatest struggles and that you've had to overcome, and obviously then one of your greatest accomplishments?
I think one of the most constant struggles I have is a pretty simple one, and it is a pretty universal one. And I'll tell you a story to introduce it. A few weeks ago, just before the launch of this book, I was in my office and I was working really focused, working hard on this pretty important project. And my son, who's 3 years old, came barging in through the door, and he's jumping around in my office, throwing things around. He's 3-year-old, so he's kind of being like a little terrorist, making a mess. And I started having this very annoyed train of thought of like, why is he doing this? Doesn't he know I'm trying to work? This is so annoying. Shouldn't he like get out of here? And on my desk, I have this photo of him when he was born. And it snapped me back to 5 years ago when my wife and I were in the middle of this 2-year struggle with infertility. I had prayed every single night that we would one day have a healthy child. And here I was in this moment complaining about the exact thing that I had prayed for. And it was a reminder to me of a very important fact, which is that sometimes in life, the things that you pray for become the things that you complain about if you let them. If you aren't able to snap yourself back into the present moment and recognize that sometimes you are quite literally living out your prayers. Over and over again, we see this happen in our lives. The things that we pray for become things that we complain about. The house that you prayed for becomes the house that you can't wait to upgrade. The car that you dreamed about becomes the car that you can't wait to trade in. Over and over and over again, we lose sight of the things that we have today and how our younger self dreamed of those things. We don't allow ourselves to feel that joy and that fulfillment in the present moment. We constantly make our own happiness conditional on some future outcome, some future achievement. And when we do that, what you find is that you will keep delaying that happiness and fulfillment until it's too late.
Yeah, I think I could certainly relate, and I'm sure every single person that's on here today can relate to that. And those are really powerful words. We should all consider what that impact is. I see curiosity behind you. Well, what is that? What does that word mean to you?
Curiosity is the real fountain of youth. I often think about the fact that, I guess in the context of my son now more than ever, that curiosity is one of those things that is hardwired into our DNA as human beings. We experience and learn the world through the lens of our own curiosity. That is how we learn about everything around us. And there's this common idea or belief that the curiosity fades as we get older. And I actually disagree. I don't think the curiosity fades. I think that our space to engage it does. We no longer have space in our lives to engage our curiosity. When you're young, if my son is walking around outside and he sees a bug and he gets really excited about bugs, he can spend the whole afternoon thinking and learning about bugs. And if we facilitate that curiosity for him, he can spend the whole afternoon learning about that thing. But in our own lives as adults, we may get really excited about something, some new AI tool, some investment opportunity, something. But then all of a sudden we have 100 emails, we have 100 texts, we have to take the trash out, we have our kids screaming, we have a million things that pull at our attention. We are no longer able, we don't have the space to engage with that curiosity. But in a world where there is clear science that supports the idea that curiosity leads to more longevity, that curiosity reduces all-cause mortality, it's really going to behoove us to create the space to engage with our curiosity on a daily or weekly basis. That doesn't mean that you need hours to go learn about bugs, but it does mean that you need to create these pockets of space in your life. You need to ventilate your calendar, breathe a little bit of air into your life where you can engage with your curiosity on a more regular basis. Because what you find is that a lot of these things that sort of feel like they lack utility, well, what utility does it have for me to go down a rabbit hole on X, Y, or Z? A lot of those things end up creating the best outcomes in your life. When you are pursuing your curiosity, when you're following your energy, outcomes follow.
Yeah, definitely. Curiosity is definitely a big word for me, and it's just absolutely fun to explore, and we need to do more, so much more of that. And that's something I push on my daughters, who's right there.
Oh, cool.
What relation in your life taught you the most about yourself? Not just love, but connection. Maybe made you discover your blind spots or patterns.
My wife has been an incredible force for introspection in my life. We've known each other since high school. We started dating when I was 16. She was 15. And because of that, we've seen each other through these different seasons of life. And she understands me and understands my motivations and my energy better than just about anyone else in the world. And so she has constantly been able to kind of push me and be a truth teller for me. This idea of truth tellers is one that keeps coming up again in my life, especially recently, that your success in life is proportional to the number of people that you have in your circle who can call you on your shit. Excuse my language. So many successful people eventually experience their downfall because they don't have people in their circle who are willing to tell them the truth. They have created an environment where it is either ineffective or disincentivized or unsafe to tell them the truth about things, to call them on their shit. And I have always endeavored to make sure that no matter what happens in my own journey, no matter what success I might have, I always have people like that are willing to call me on it. And my wife is the number one version of that. My mom certainly is. My dad certainly is. But my wife is the number one version of that. And I am so, so grateful to have people in my life that can constantly do that for me.
Let's segue to time wealth. And obviously, you're super busy right now with coming out with a New York Times bestseller. How do you protect your time and potentially saying no to could be huge opportunities?
Yeah, I say no a lot. I've had to get a lot better about this. I mean, I have these two tests in the book that are sort of what I would qualify as like part of the art of saying no, that I really try to utilize as much as I need to. The first one is what I call the right now test. This is the idea that humans are very bad at thinking about future time. So when someone asks you to do something a month or two from now, you always assume you're going to have more time a month or two from now than you do today. And so what happens is this thing called the yes, damn effect, where you say yes to the thing that's a month or two from now, then the thing ends up coming and you say, damn, why did I say yes to that thing? And the way that you fight back against that is to pull those future things into the present. So you ask yourself when a new opportunity comes up, would I want to do this if it were tonight? Or would I want to do this if it were tomorrow? If the answer is yes, you're still going to want to do it a month from now. So you say yes. But if the answer is no, you're not going to want to do it a month from now. So just say no to it today. That has single-handedly had more impact on my life than just about any other simple rule or test over the last 6 or 12 months, because it just avoids taking on things that you're not going to want to do in the future. The other one, which I think is even more important professionally for people, is what I call the new opportunity test. When a new opportunity comes in, what happens is we're optimistic. We get this shiny object syndrome. We get so excited about this new thing. And so we have a tendency to take these things on with this sort of blind excitement and optimism. The new opportunity test has two layers. The first layer is to say, is this a hell yes opportunity? Is this just a slam dunk, super exciting, all my energies towards this? If the answer is no to that, you should just say no right away. If the answer is yes, you go to the second layer of this question. The second layer of this test is, if I assume that this is going to take twice as long and be half as profitable or rewarding as I currently think, would I still want to do it? And if the answer is yes, then you take it on. But if the answer is no, you say no. What that second layer does is it forces you to pull back that blind optimism that we naturally have when we're taking on something new, force a bit of rationality into your brain, because the reality is that most things take way longer than we expect, and they're much less profitable than we expect when you start out. If you would still want to do it knowing that, it's probably something that your energy is really going to be pulling you towards that's going to be beneficial.
Yeah, I need to write those two things down and practice that.
Yeah, there's two cool like charts in the book in the Time Wealth Guide section that you can like print out and just like tape up on your desk. I know a bunch of people that have done that, and it is super effective.
I'm doing that when I get home later tonight.
Yeah.
I know you're a lifelong learner. What's something like maybe non-obvious you've learned recently that try and change the way you think about the world?
I guess my most recent one that I've really been reflecting on is just this idea that you should always take yourself seriously. There's this like common trope for a while that you shouldn't take yourself so seriously. Like, oh, don't take yourself so seriously, or none of us are going to make it out alive. All of this like wisdom that goes viral on social media. And I actually think the complete opposite. I think that you should always take yourself seriously, because the way that the world treats you is a reflection of the way you treat yourself. And if you don't take yourself seriously, why should anyone else? So what I've constantly been thinking about and saying, both to my son and to anyone else that I speak to, is do the tiny daily actions to take yourself seriously. Walk tall, stand up straight, look people in the eye, speak with intention, really listen to people deeply. Do those tiny things that indicate that you take yourself seriously. Because when you do that, the world really does start bending to your will rather than the other way around.
And you could tell those people when they walk in a room that do that. And there's a difference. There's an energy. People flock to those people, and so it's if you practice that, you'll notice a big life change.
I think that's true. The other one that's been jumping out to me recently is I really believe that life is a game of awareness and action. You kind of have awareness to know a thing and then action to act upon that thing. But awareness is perishable. There are all of these things in life that people sort of say like, oh yeah, well, I know that. I know that thing. Knowing a thing in a moment is much less important than knowing it in the moment. Awareness is most useful at the testing point. Like you may know something in the back of your mind, but at the testing point, if it's sitting in the back of your mind and you're not able to act upon it as a result, it's totally useless because that awareness is perishable. So the most important truths, those pieces of awareness that we really need to have on a daily basis to act upon, we need to constantly remind ourselves of those things. We need to constantly shine a light on them to make sure that those things don't hide in plain sight in our lives.
I think I certainly have at fault of that. How do you remind yourself those things so that you are more aware of in that moment?
I create triggers all around me. So like, I gave the example of that story with my son. Like the photo of him and I on my desk is a trigger, right? Like that is something that I can look at that centers me around the things that are most important in my life. Little visual reminders, little wording and phrasing reminders. I have this idea in the book of like a life razor, this concept of kind of a single identity defining rule or statement for your life. Having that out in front of you on a regular basis so that you can look at it and recognize like what is that rule, so that when you are tested, when any new chaos or opportunity enters your life, you can think about how your ideal self should show up in a given situation. You pull yourself back into that mode. You sort of like flip the switch to become that character, and that allows you to act accordingly.
Yeah, I challenge everyone out there listening to write down one thing, one awareness to be aware of, and to have that reminder for you for a real growth opportunity.
Completely agree.
What does a wealthy day look like for you, health wise? Not necessarily ideal, but something that's real for you.
Health wise,
Yeah.
I try to stay very disciplined with my routines health wise. Yeah, I played college baseball. So my whole life I've sort of been into fitness and health. I would say now the main reason is because I believe that it is a catalyst for every single other type of wealth. I do not know a single area of life that has more ripple effects than taking care of yourself physically. Because again, it's part of taking yourself seriously. When you treat yourself well, that has ripple effects. You are reassuming agency over your life. You're convincing yourself that you are capable of taking an action and creating an outcome. So I try to reinstill that every single day. Every single day I'm moving. I'm doing a lot of running and a lot of lifting. I run marathons, and I kind of try to combine that with a lifting routine where I never look like a runner, even if I can be a good runner. I have a sauna and cold plunge that I tend to use daily. I eat according to a pretty strict set of macros that I try to follow on a daily basis. I just find that when I stick to my routines and my kind of non-negotiables around taking care of myself, around sleeping, around eating and around moving, I'm able to show up in the world as the best version of myself.
Yeah, 100% every day. I get some exercise, get some sunlight, eat right. I mean, it's not perfect, but man, I'm able to think much better, love much better, do everything much better because of the healthy environment I've created.
Yeah, and you don't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
Like I think having a list of your sort of non-negotiables around health is a really good place to start, which is just to say, like, what is the minimum viable thing that I need to be able to do on a daily basis that allows me to feel good, that allows me to feel like I can thrive in these different ways. And it's usually less than you think. Like for me, as long as I move my body for 30 minutes a day, make sure that I'm prioritizing protein at every single meal, and sleeping about 7 hours, I feel great. Like those three things, I feel great. That might not be my ideal day routine. I might have more that I want to do on an ideal day. But if I'm traveling, if there's chaos, if there's, a crazy busy day, whatever the thing is, as long as I can hit those non-negotiables, I know that my day is a success. And so that sort of goes to this principle that I generally have that I think is a good practice for everyone, which is to create like a daily or a weekly win card. Which what I think of when I do this is like on Sunday night, I'll sit down and I'll write down what would constitute a win for this week. Like, what are the few simple things that if I achieved these things, the week would be a win? And it should be very few things, just like a couple of big picture important items that if I got those things done, the day or the week was a win. And that allows you to zoom out and kind of keep the bigger picture in mind as you navigate the ups and downs of any given day.
If your son could inherit only one of the five wealths and the rest he had to build on his own, I'm really curious, what would you gift him and why?
That's a good question. I guess I would gift him relationships. I really think that having people in your life who are positive, who encourage you to think bigger, who are inspiring, who are uplifting, makes everything possible. There's this common trope that you should focus on the journey, not the destination. And I actually disagree. I think you should focus on the people. Because when you surround yourself with incredible, inspiring, uplifting people, The journeys become more brilliant and the destinations become far, far greater and brighter. Um, Focusing on the people is the pathway to living a good life. And that is personally and professionally. The best deals that I've ever done in my life, financially, in my investing life, or in my business life, entrepreneurship, have all been a result of people. It's always been that there was some person that I got to know and built a relationship with that led to a really interesting opportunity. It was never that I had some extraordinary idea and just did it on my own. It was always through people. So I think if you have those people, if you can build those relationships, if you can cultivate that, if you have that network personally and professionally, the sky's the limit in all of these other areas of life.
I think that ties back into what we were discussing earlier about social wealth that's having the most profound effect on your life.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It's and look, it's hard because a lot of people are really held back by the relationships that they cling to. Um, you sort of become your environment. You end up blending into your environment. The people you surround yourself with really do determine your destiny in a lot of ways. And in my opinion, the harsh truth here is that someone is either holding you back or pushing you forward. There really is no in between. And I think being a little bit more ruthless about how you expend and who you gift your precious energy to is one of the changes that a lot of people need to make that will immediately improve their lives.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that's for some people, some of the hardest actions to take. And I think you don't have to completely cut someone out of your life, but maybe it's you're spending less time or whatnot, and giving more time to the ones that help you grow and flourish. Quite honestly,
Completely agree. Um, you don't need to cut people out to limit the energy that you give to them. Time and energy are not the same thing. You can spend an hour with someone, but if you're sitting there on your phone the whole time, you're not giving them a whole lot of your energy. You're not going to feel very connected. And similarly, you could spend 5 minutes with someone, but if you're truly intently listening and with them and present, it can be worth hours and hours of time. And so you can spend time with people that may be bad for you, but just not open your energy up to them so that they can't hurt you in that way. And you can redeploy that energy to the people that really do uplift you, and it'll make a big difference in your life.
do you have a mindset or quote that's anchored you through seasons of uncertainty?
My favorite quote of all time is the ancient poet Rumi, who once wrote, "As you start to walk on the way appears. As you start to walk on the way appears." That is a reminder that you cannot stand where you are and plan out the perfect journey. You cannot expect to see the entire path that is laid out before you and just have a light shined on it. You have to start walking. As you start to walk, the path reveals itself. And that requires, on a daily basis, embracing and tolerating uncertainty. I think tolerance for uncertainty is the most important trait in life. The one who can tolerate the most uncertainty is the one who will eventually win. The person who can show up when the rewards are uncertain, keep showing up with consistency and with discipline. That is the person that I will always bet on. You never bet against the person who just keeps showing up.
Yeah, absolutely. If someone listens to this conversation, it only takes one action to build holistic wealth, what should it be?
Zoom out and ask yourself the question of what you truly want your life to look like. What is the money for? There are so many things in life that we chase that we very rarely take the time to ask whether we truly want those things. You go chase money, you go chase all these grand ambitions and these things, and you very rarely ask yourself, what is the life I am trying to build? What is the point of this money that I am earning and trying to go and create? And once you define that, once you have a clear picture in your mind of the life that you are trying to build towards, what the money is really for, then you can start taking actions in line with that.
So when you look back 30 years from now, what do you hope people will say about you, Sahil Bloom?
I hope people will say that I inspired them to take some tiny action to think differently about success, about wealth, and about what it means to live a good life. Um, if I can spend the next 30, 40, 50 years of my life creating those kind of positive ripples in the world, I will consider that a life well lived.
Well, you've certainly inspired me and given me some great perspective. And I'm sure everyone that's listening today, you've shared so much and greatly appreciated. And I look forward to digesting your content, your newsletter for many, many years. And ultimately, I know you got another book in you at some point too, right?
I hope so. I've got one in the works now, so looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for your time and your wisdom. Sahil Bloom, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you guys got as much value as I did. One of my favorite lines of his is, as you start to walk on the way appears. And it always does. This is Gary Lipsky signing off. I'll be back next week with another informative episode on the Real Estate Investor Podcast. To all of our listeners, thanks for joining us. And if you like this episode, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher and like, subscribe, and leave a review, as it will help us reach more people. And if you'd like to learn more about what we do at Break of Day Capital, head over to our website at breakofdaycapital.com and sign up for our newsletter and fill out our investor application. We'll talk to you next week.